Well, hello there. Welcome to another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you for clicking on the show. I am your host, Don Kleppen, and I created the Cannabis Man podcast as a way to kind of take a journalistic look at all things cannabis. If it's your first time here, we interview different guests on the show, whether they might be newsmakers, policymakers like government elected officials, or leaders of these groups and organizations that are now responsible for making the laws and the rules of legalized cannabis markets around the U.S. and around the world. I am also talking with entrepreneurs, people who have created products or are coming up with experiences, whether that might be growing cannabis or infusing cannabis products or some other way of having you experience cannabis in a fun new way. All kinds of stuff like that coming up now as cannabis is more legalized and normalized all the time, which is very exciting. So on this show, I've got another great guest interview for you this week. This is Aaron Edelheit. He's an investor. He is extremely knowledgeable about the cannabis space and he shares some insights into, in his estimation, where the real opportunity for growth is in the future of cannabis. We all know that cannabis is a booming industry. There are some estimates that already put it at about $75 to $100 billion a year, even with this hodgepodge legalization, like patchwork network that we have going with some states legalizing, but federally it's still a Schedule I prohibited substance. There's this exciting stuff happening, but even in this sort of in-between, half legal, half not, it's still a $100 billion a year industry, and that's only going up. But as Aaron Edelheit points out, the way that we're doing this, and we, by we, I mean the U.S. government and kind of here in America, the way that we're doing this patchwork state-by-state legalization here, as Aaron puts it, we're not incentivizing growth and investment in the right places. And in his estimation, there's a lot of people that are going to be kind of wiped out trying to get into this cannabis green rush, as we've been calling it, and it's just a very fascinating interview, so I look forward to bringing that to you as well. Also, I've got the News Joint Wrap, brought to you by Illinois News Joint, as always, looking at some upcoming events, some news stories in and around Illinois having to do with cannabis, just some developments. Obviously, as I'm living and working here in Chicago, Illinois, this is top of mind for me, and I love the work that Jason Brown and his colleagues at IllinoisNewsJoint.com are doing. So I'm going to bring you some of those stories, as well as my strain of the week. I'm going to tell you what I've been smoking on this week, and I've got another news story toward the end that I thought was worth bringing to your attention. All of that coming up on this episode, this 40th episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Hit it! Yeah. That's the theme right there. Thanks again for joining this episode, listener, and let's launch right into the News Joint Wrap. That's right. This is a collection of news stories and events coming up around Illinois related to cannabis, and it's all curated for you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Think of it as the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And let's start with the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation is warning of some social equity lottery scammers. That's right. Seems like here in Illinois, cannot ever have something nice without some scammers trying to take part. Maybe it's an American thing at large, but either way, the article goes a little like this. Scammers have always been a part of the cannabis black market, and the legal market now has brought an entirely new set of scammers into the industry. IDFPR, that's the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation, they put out a press release last week warning of these social equity criteria license lottery scams. They're encouraging individuals to be vigilant about any solicitations to become a potential business partner for the Social Equity Criteria License Lottery. That's the SECL. You'll see those abbreviated in some documentation if you've ever looked into applying to get a license for dispensaries in Illinois. IDFPR in particular here, warning that scammers may say they are looking for partners who qualify under the social equity criteria in order to steal their targets' personal information like bank accounts account numbers, social security numbers, and credit card numbers. IDFPR encouraging all potential applicants to do their due diligence on any partnerships and beware of any partnership offers from unknown persons or companies. Individuals are encouraged to look up unknown companies through an internet search, through the Better Business Bureau, or with the Illinois Secretary of State. I can vouch for both of those organizations, Better Business Bureau and Steve Burness. They are always looking at which businesses are shady, what kind of scams are happening. It's a private company. It's not a government organization. You got to know that. So they are sometimes trying to sell services. But that being said, the information that the Better Business Bureau provides is valid, and it's very, very helpful in determining when something is legitimate and when somebody's trying to scam you. Same thing, obviously, with the Illinois Secretary of State. That is a government office, and so you have the backing of the Illinois government behind you. Newly elected SOS Alexi Janulius. He's been doing some great stuff at the Illinois DMV, and I guarantee you they can help you with this too. But this is something that's crucial, okay? Because as we've talked about, the social equity part of Illinois' licensed lottery is definitely tricky. And obviously it's crucially important. As I've said before on the show, you cannot ignore the social equity component of this. You cannot say as a country to a group of people who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, who are still, many of whom are still behind bars in various states for doing something that we are now encouraging in the states that legalized it. You cannot ignore that fact. That hypocrisy is still enacted today. There are people behind bars right now for smoking cannabis, for moving cannabis, and that is stuff that we're encouraging in these legal states just like Illinois. So you can't ignore the social equity component. You have to try and you have to try and address some of that damage that was done by the war on drugs, specifically to Black and brown communities there. And these scammers, this issue, which is really pernicious here, IDFPR's warning about the scammers, these people, okay, are with money, are looking for those who qualify for social equity. That would be Black or brown people who are from communities who have been disproportionately impacted. Could be veteran status as well, could be which communities you live in or which communities your family lives in. There are some residency social equity implications as well. So it's not just, only Black and brown people, but obviously that is the major group that's going to be targeted by these scammers, presumably. So if anybody's reaching out to you and saying, hey, you want to partner up and do this social equity cannabis lottery thing, just be wary. Just keep, common sense in your head and realize that if somebody's reaching out of the blue and saying, hey, I got a great opportunity for you, pal, treat it kind of like that Nigerian prince who's asking you to send him $10,000 via email so you could be a millionaire after that. Just treat it like the scam that it is. And if somebody that you don't know or recognize is reaching out to you and offering you some kind of deal of a lifetime that sounds too good to be true, chances are it is, and just report it to the Better Business Bureau or the Illinois Secretary of State. Moving on to our second story, Illinois Senate bill considers cannabis drive-through pickup. Loved reading this story. Illinois might go from no legal curbside pickup for registered medical patients to legal drive-up window service if a recently introduced Senate bill becomes law. Now, I've been talking about this for the last several months. I said toward the end of last year that I believed that Illinois curbside pickup and delivery functions for cannabis would be legalized in 2023, and I still believe that strongly, and this Senate bill just further sort of confirms that suspicion of mine. February 10th, earlier this month, a senator by the name of Ram Villavalam, Villivalam, apologies for that, I hope I'm not mispronouncing it, but he introduced Senate Bill 2281. This bill would, quote, establish a protocol to dispense cannabis on any real property or parking area under the dispensary's ownership or control, such as transactions at drive-through windows, requires the protocol to adhere to the requirements for point-of-sale dispensing, transactions under the Acts, the Cannabis Regulations and Tax Act, removes language prohibiting dispensing organizations from operating drive-through windows. So, removing from the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act that language which prohibits them from running drive-through windows, that is being removed by Senate Bill 2281. It also prohibits dispensing organizations from transporting cannabis to residents or other locations beyond the real property or parking area under the dispensary's ownership ownership or control. So this is not talking about delivery to your home yet from the dispensary. That is not what this Senate bill is in particular. This one is you might still be able to go to a dispensary, and instead of having to wait in line or whatever, you can just do a drive-through, never have to get out of your car, or your caretaker can drive to the dispensary and take it from the drive-through. Still definitely a step up, not quite the at-home delivery, which is still on the horizon. I guarantee you that. I still believe that maybe we'll see that later this year, certainly before 2025. I am positive of that. We will have cannabis home delivery, and I bet you by 2025 you'll be able to place an order through your DoorDash or your Grubhub app, and they're just going to be able to do it like any other alcohol or food delivery that was really popularized during the pandemic so much. Illinois has until June 30th to amend the law before the variance which allows curbside pickup expires. During the pandemic, IDFPR incorporated a variance for Illinois cannabis laws that allowed cannabis curbside pickup for registered medical patients, but again, they did not have drive-through windows. They just didn't implement those. That variance expired at the end of last year, and since, 2 new variances have extended curbside pickup until that June 30th deadline. So that is what's developing with Senate Bill 2281. Some drive-through windows might be heading to your local Illinois cannabis dispensaries. And then a little event coming up this week, Thursday. High Minded Events is hosting Bud Tender Choice Awards on Thursday. It's the inaugural Bud Tender Choice Awards. It'll be February 23rd is Thursday. I'm recording this on the 21st. If current dispensary employees or new dispensary license holders have not received an invitation to the event, you can still request one. There's a link at IllinoisNewsJoint.com inside of this article. Registration has now closed. It closed last night at 10 o'clock from when this was released, this episode. All guests have to pre-register if you're going to the Bud Tender Choice Awards. Walk-ins will not be permitted to the event. High-Minded Events set out surveys to bud tenders throughout Illinois, asking them to select their favorite brands in various categories. High-Minded Events has collected and tallied those results and will announce on social media Thursday the winners in the categories of top device, best packaging, best social media account, doing the most to move the Illinois industry forward, best tech platform for career development, top social media influencer, best topical/transdermal brand as well. There are some other brands and categories that are listed in this article as well, including top chocolate edible, top gummy edible, top edible that's not a chocolate or gummy, device brands, everyday flower brands, solventless concentrates, and overall product packaging and more. You can look at all of these categories. You can see who has been entered, and keep an eye out Thursday for that social media announcement of the High-Minded Bud Tender Choice Award winners for all these categories. And remember, you can find out more about these events and news stories, and you can listen to all the Illinois News Joint wraps of the past at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. And now it's time to move on to the strain of the week. This is one of my favorite parts of doing the podcast, just kind of sharing with you the strain of cannabis that's been powering my week. And if you've listened to the show before, you know that I love to pair my cannabis with coffee. And that is what I'm doing this morning on February 22nd when I'm recording this show for you here. And my coffee is a nice Costa Rican blend, low acidity. I love the high altitude coffees, been really on that kick lately. But I don't really put anything in my coffees. I just kind of drink it black. I started doing that in my early 20s just to kind of eliminate the extra calories and sugar of some of those coffee flavorers and some of the additives that people put in them. So I enjoy just plain black coffee, and I like trying coffees from different areas of the world. And I've been really enjoying some of these high-altitude, low-acidity coffees from places like Costa Rica, so cheers on that. Oh, yes. And the strain of the week, the part that we all care about. Let's be real here. The strain of the week that I'm going with is a sativa. Surprise, surprise. Regular listeners know I'm a huge fan of sativas. Definitely pairs well with coffees. And this week's strain of the week is from Cresco Labs, and it is titled Strawberry Milkshake. Love the name. Nothing better than a strawberry milkshake on a summer day after a cheeseburger. My fiance Gretchen, her nephew, was just visiting with us over the weekend, and we took the little guy, he's about 7 years old, and we took him to the Shed Aquarium. We took him to the Lincoln Park Zoo, and we were able to get some burgers and milkshakes after the zoo, and boy, that really really hit the spot. It's been a long time since I've had a burger and shake. We're kind of doing a weight loss plan to get, we're shedding for the wedding, as they say. And so we haven't really indulged too much food-wise, and man, that burger and shake hit the spot. And so I was looking for a strain to kind of complement, and strawberry milkshake really jumped out at me. I happened to get the strawberry flavor. It's when I got the milkshake on Sunday, that's something I tend to enjoy. Gretchen, my fiance, and Tommy, her nephew, both got chocolate shakes. And I feel like that's kind of a more popular choice. Chocolate shake is great, but I, for whatever reason, have always been partial to a strawberry milkshake, and so maybe that's why this strain kind of jumped out at me. But as they describe it at CrescoCannabis.com, strawberry milkshake is a perfect pairing for a nice day outside. Let me go ahead and emphasize that Sunday was a beautiful day around the Lincoln Park Zoo. It was kind of sunny. I mean, beautiful for February in Chicago, let's say. Let me put that standard right out there. It was 50 degrees, partly sunny. Definitely not like a day in paradise, but after winter in Chicago and for a February day, 50 degrees and sunny is pretty amazing. So everybody was in a great mood, and I was able to take some dog walkers with this strawberry milkshake out and burn a couple of those. And under the sunshine on a nice day outside, the strawberry milkshake is really, really nice. This is a cross between strawberry and Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. Those are the parent lineages, and those combine to create this strain of strawberry milkshake. It boasts top terpenes of myrcene, caryophyllene. It's fruity. You get some strawberry notes, paying homage to its namesake, obviously. It is really delightful. It gives you a boost of energy, happiness. Some people report getting the giggles. I didn't necessarily feel that myself. I did, I guess I had some good laughs. Felt like kind of a typical cannabis experience. The average THC they report is between 18 and 25%. This particular brand, for me, this batch is hovering at about 21%. And I picked this up a couple of weeks back, and the harvest date officially is November 27th of 2022, packaged on December 20th. So very, very recently, the freshness is there. I felt the happy and energetic effects. Again, the prevalent terpenes of the caryophyllene, the myrcene there, and the flavor of a fruity strawberry. Really, this is a kind of strain that is just perfect for a day outside. Summer is coming. You pick up a few of these when you're going out for a picnic, or when you do have some kind of, gathering, or you're hanging with your friends, or it's just perfect for socializing. It's perfect for maybe going for a walk or having a picnic outside with your significant other or something. Strawberry milkshake from Cresco Labs. This is something I highly recommend. Spring, summer, they're coming. They're on the way. They're around the corner. And get yourself a nice outdoor sativa like strawberry milkshake to put yourself in the mood to, have a nice day outside under the sun. Cheers. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Nice. So fruity. I love that. And speaking of smoking, I'm smoking this strawberry milkshake out of this little piece which I picked up from 420pipes.com. Listeners, I'm an affiliate of 420 Pipes ever since I interviewed Nick Thomas on the show. I love the business model that they have there. They have this Smoke Local initiative where you can go to 420pipes.com, and let's say you're not interested in the $4.20 product selection that they have there every single day. Let's say you're not interested in that. You should be, because they're well made, and because who wants to spend $20 on a new piece every few months when you've got that dead resin clogging up your airways there? Dead resin, talked about that with Ethan Stockton and Matt Ross last week. I'm trademarking that. Dead resin is real. I love the name of that, and that's that junk that gunks up all of our glass pieces. Who wants to clean that? Who wants to spend the labor? Who wants to get that stickiness on your fingers and the smell in your smoke area? I certainly do not. And so the $4.20 options that 420pipes.com has every day to replace your glass pieces every week or so, however long it takes for you to gum up the works. I love 420pipes.com for that. But let's say you're not interested in the $4.20 products they've got. Let's say you're not interested in the sample box where you can subscribe for new stuff to arrive in your mail every single month from 420pipes.com. Cannabis products like glass pipes, like grinders, like pipe cleaners, if you do like doing that. But if you're not interested in that stuff, they've got the Smoke Local initiative where you put your zip code wherever you're living, you type that into 420pipes.com, and they will populate a list of local head shops of cannabis product shops near you. And you can buy their products, supporting a local business near to you, and having their products shipped to your home through 420pipes.com. You never have to get up and leave, and you can still support a local business and get the cannabis products that you want. 420pipes.com has these deals every single day, along with the products I mentioned for $4.20 every day. They have other ones that are higher tiers. I've got a wonderful bong. They've got these locally made acrylic bongs, and those are obviously a bit more expensive. They have several tiers that go higher than that $4.20 tier, but to have options that low every day, I think is wonderful. And to be able to support a local business without ever leaving your home and being able to have it shipped to you, I think that is a wonderful initiative that they're starting, Smoke Local. And remember, whatever you buy at 420pipes.com, use the promo code CannabisMan at checkout, and you can knock 10% off your cart order. That is 420pipes.com, promo code CannabisMan to knock 10% off whatever you buy.
Hi, my name is Steve Owens, and I'm inviting you on a weekly journey. Take a walk with me down Fascination Street as I get to know the fun stories and impactful moments of actors, directors, musicians, athletes, authors, comedians, artists, astronauts, and regular people. New episodes every Monday, available on all platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart. With well over 300 episodes, you're bound to find stories you connect with on Fascination Street Podcast.
And speaking of cannabis, have you thought about growing your own cannabis? Here in Illinois, if you're a medical card holder, you're allowed to grow 5 plants at home. And if you're interested in starting your grow journey, something you've thought about, maybe you want to save a little money at the dispensaries, maybe you'd like to kind of grow your own medicine, like people do growing their own food in their gardens. If you've thought about this and you're interested, don't forget about my guys at Deep Space Creations, LLC. My guy Matt Ross started Deep Space Creations a few years back. He understood the importance of high-quality genetics. High-quality genetics is one of the most important places to start if you are hoping for a high-quality product. And you don't get any higher quality than what they've got at Deep Space Creations. Chem de la Chem is one of their most popular strains. Put them on the map, and what Matt Ross has done, breeding successors and different lineages from Chem de la Chem and some of the other lines that they have there, that is the highest quality genetics that you can get. And if you go to NeptuneSeedBank.com or simply type Deep Space Creations LLC into your favorite search engine, and it'll take you likely to their Instagram page where there is a URL that you can click on. Or if you head to NeptuneSeedBank.com, you can search Deep Space Creations there and their products will come up. It's an exciting time for cannabis, and it's an exciting time to start your home grow. And if you're starting a home grow, you've got to be thinking about the genetics. And if you're thinking about high quality genetics in cannabis, you've got to think about Deep Space Creations, LLC. Listener, my guest today is a man who wears many hats. He sold a real estate company in 2015 and has since founded Mindset Capital, which is a private investment firm. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Bloomberg, and the New York Times. He's given lectures on entrepreneurship and investments all over the U.S., Canada, and South Africa, and he is one of the social venture partners in Santa Barbara working on homelessness, and also the author of the book The Heartbreak, The Case for a 24/6 Lifestyle. I also understand a big fan of non-dairy chocolate chip cookies. We'll find out more about all of that. Please welcome Aaron Edelheit. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on here. And I just want to...
By the way, speaking of those cookies,
yeah.
I just found out my wife just introduced this amazing Ghirardelli.
Oh.
They just came out with non-dairy chocolate chips.
Whoa.
And they're so good, it's ridiculous.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I will definitely take a look for those. Ghirardelli that's great chocolate, so I'm down to try anything they do.
For it to be non-dairy, it was a big moment over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, that's impressive and something to celebrate, certainly. Perfect for Thanksgiving discovery, definitely. I'm curious, since we're on that, is there a reason, the non-dairy preference, just healthier, that kind of thing?
I can't, my body can no longer properly process it.
Fair enough. That's a good reason to abstain. Good as any, I would say. So, as I mentioned, you founded Mindset Capital, which is a private investment firm, and obviously you work in investing. And this is a cannabis podcast, so I want to talk about that. But first, just tell me, how did you? You've done a lot, and when did you first get kind of bitten by the entrepreneur bug? When did you want to build something for yourself?
Well, I think I really got bit by the investment bug very, very young. And I remember my dad reading the Wall Street Journal, and I'm going to date myself because I don't think they have it anymore, but all the stock tables, pages and pages of stock tables. And I asked him what it was, and he told me, and I just became fascinated at a very young age. And then the more I read, the more I studied it, the more I became fascinated. And so that's kind of where my interests lie. Really started as an investor. The entrepreneurship bug kind of really hit me only really as an investor when in 2008 I started first with a friend buying foreclosed homes, fixing them up and renting them out, and then launched my own, what I thought was a side partnership as an investor. And then when I really understood the opportunity, went really big and eventually bought 2,500 single family rentals. And that's the first company where I became, kind of an entrepreneur, not just an investor, where we had our own property management, renovation, et cetera. And then we sold that company to a public real estate investment trust in 2015.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And good for you. That sounds like it was quite a journey. And now to be back, doing, what you really love, investing and all of that with Mindset Capital. Before we kind of get to what you do there, you live in California, yeah?
Yeah, yes. I live in Santa Barbara, California.
Love it. Such a beautiful place. One of the greatest places to just kind of linger at in the world, as far as I can tell. And that's California. Obviously, was an early adopter of cannabis, even before it was officially legal. California was pretty well known for cannabis use. And I'm just kind of curious, when were you first introduced to it, and what made you interested in it?
So I was first. So one thing you should know is that it's probably related, but I'm a workaholic, driven in ways I don't fully understand. And it's one of the reasons I spent 3.5 years working on a book about the business case for the Sabbath, which is, I wrote a book called The Heartbreak, you mentioned, called The Heartbreak Case for a 24/6 Lifestyle. Is really just to have a day where I'm not working and to really protect myself against my own, in some ways can be my own worst enemy, but it's related as I suffer occasionally from like really bad bouts of insomnia, which is perfectly fine when it's terrible when you're single, but I have 3 small kids.
Right.
And it's really bad when you have small kids and you not only need to work, but you need to be a good parent.
Yeah.
And so my first real introduction to cannabis was, hey, is there a non-pharmaceutical drug that can help me sleep when I go through these terrible bouts? And what I've come to find is that I now have cannabis gummies that are not only THC, the active ingredient in cannabis, but CBN, which seems to help for sleep. And now just knowing it's in my cabinet that I can go and get it if I need it is very helpful. And occasionally I'll just go through periods, whether stress or what have you, where I can't sleep, and I can take it for a couple of days, no real grogginess in the morning, reset my sleep system, and sleep perfectly fine. And it is just life-changing, frankly. And so that has helped. And then researching the whole cannabis space at the same time feeds into one of the things that I've done over the course of my career. Is I started investing in small cap, micro cap companies that were underfollowed or going through restructurings or turnarounds. And then and small caps and micro caps are generally less efficient, have less coverage or no coverage, no one really following them or paying attention. and then getting into housing, buying single-family homes when no one wanted a home and there was no institutional ownership of homes. And now going to cannabis, which because it's federally illegal, there's very, very little institutional participation or ownership, and very little, research coverage. And so there's a lot of inefficiency. Kind of all comes together with kind of the unifying thread over my investment career, kind of drawn to these situations where I don't have a lot of competition.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And just to kind of go back to the insomnia thing in cannabis, I find that totally relatable, and I've spoken to a lot of people on the show where that's the exact same case. I think that the desire to achieve sleep, restful sleep, is something that has driven a lot of people, myself included, to discovering and then utilizing cannabis, and found it life-changing, as you did. And
then from there, you're like, oh, wait, it's not like I know many people who are involved in the industry who've been smoking or consuming cannabis in some way, shape, or form their whole life. That wasn't me. Mm-hmm. And now I have branched off where I occasionally, will enjoy cannabis just for pleasure.
Yeah.
And the other benefit is and we talked about the chocolate chip cookies, or chocolate chips and dairy, but as you get older, your body, you cannot process, alcohol is like a great example is, hangovers are so much worse. The effects of alcohol, at least for me and for many of my friends and family, are so much worse as you get older. That the other thing that I found is that cannabis, you can consume cannabis for pleasure, and the side effects are so much better. Like you wake up the next morning, you're perfectly fine. You're not spending like a whole day with like a massive headache. So that's been another thing that has that I found is that I'm replacing more of alcohol when I decide to relax or enjoy than in the past.
Right. Yeah. And that too, I think that's a great point because, you mentioned earlier, pharmaceuticals, if you might be prescribed something for insomnia, and then the recreational side of things like alcohol, we have a lot of substances in our lives that just have a much more punishing after effect, after their use. And cannabis offers such a wonderful alternative. It just doesn't have that same it doesn't take as much out of you for using it, and you're okay the next day.
I completely agree. And that's why one of the things that I like to think of cannabis is kind of like the great substitute, mm-hmm. In that you see that there's lots of people, and you see it in the data, that whether it's opioids or it's, God forbid, like fentanyl or alcohol or some other kind of painkillers or sleep medication, prescription pills, etc., is that cannabis is just a significantly less toxic, replacement.
Right.
For many things that people are already using.
Totally.
Whether illegally or legally.
Right, exactly. And because of that, it just offers, such opportunity. And it's one of the many reasons why there's so much excitement around it. But at the same time, like you said earlier, the industry at large, because it's still federally illegal, there is not much regulation. There is not much research in terms of, building structures of companies and businesses and stuff like that. And we're just kind of sussing that out now day to day, as different states are legalizing. And, you wrote an article a while back about licensing in Illinois. And, there's been some movement since then. IDFPR, the state Department of Professional Regulation and Finances there, they gave finally some lottery winners licenses from the summer. And, we're still very much a long way away here in Illinois from the place we need to be in terms of equity at all and proper social equity representation among dispensary ownership and such. But I'm just kind of curious, what do you think of in terms of what Illinois has been doing and the state markets thus far and the licenses that have been given out? What do you think of how Illinois has rolled out recreational cannabis in the last 3 years?
So I have a lot of thoughts, and my thinking has somewhat evolved. And so one of the things that's really strange about cannabis that you just need to back up and view from like 30,000 feet up is that every state is kind of like its own country. And it has their own rules and so where my thinking is today is that you essentially have three great, what I call protected states, and protected from competition, that have created almost oligopolies that allow for significantly outsized market share, profits, control of distribution. And Illinois is one of them. And I believe Florida is another, in New Jersey. And once you kind of get out of those states, you have significant changes. You have a lot more competition, and in general, kind of lower profits. And what's fascinating to watch Illinois is that, and if you look at the big MSOs that are created, they kind of all came out of Illinois. Like GT, Green Thumb,
right? Cresco,
Verano, Cresco,
right?
They all came out because it allowed them the cash flow to be able to then go and expand into other markets, because they could not only they were not only protected, like they controlled the dispensaries, they had the big production no one else could get, and it was adult use. And other states were illegal, so you had out-of-state residents coming into Illinois with limited competition. And so it gave them an ability to then get very large and go into other states, et cetera. And so what's fascinating from Illinois, and I'm going to answer it in like a different way, is how newer states that are going public are looking at that and saying, we don't want that. We don't want the market being controlled by like 3 or 4 or 5 companies. And so you see like New York or other states say,
Michigan, for instance.
I don't know if we want that. And so you have all this experimentation going on all around, and those dispensaries are part of it. Is that Illinois was supposed to issue all these social equity dispensaries, which would then increase the number of dispensaries, and so it's just interesting looking at Illinois. I actually have come to believe that Illinois is more of the exception to the rule than the norm, which has made me a little more bearish on the larger MSOs and how, if they're able to duplicate what has been created in Illinois. And so when I look at all the states coming out, whether it, that are going adult use, whether it be Maryland, how Massachusetts is working, New York, et cetera, there's a lot more of the newer markets are having caps, are having ownership caps, the number of dispensaries you can own, that are capping the size of cultivation, that are making it much, much harder for larger companies to just come in and just dominate the market. And so that's the instructive view that I've taken, and where my viewpoint has kind of evolved around Illinois is that in many ways Illinois is special. That's good if you're in Illinois, but it's not great if you think that Illinois can be duplicated.
It's fascinating. A great way of spelling that out too, because I just had some guests on recently who had at one point filed a lawsuit. They did have to drop it, but basically they kind of accused those three companies that you just mentioned of forming a monopoly effectively on the market and establishing what they called kind of like the cannabis cartel. Effectively controlling all sides of it and being able to just, drive up those profits and elbow out any competition. It is an interesting, when you do look at it from the 30,000-foot view that you just kind of pointed out to, comparing it with other states, it is really fascinating to see the disparity, the difference in how those states are rolling it out compared with Illinois. And I think one of the biggest issues, one of the most offensive, I think, failures in terms of Illinois' rollout of legal cannabis was they professed the social equity part of it so loudly. That was meant to be such a central portion of it. And here we are 3 years later, and there is one operational social equity craft grow dispensary. It's in Rockford. And some other ones just got their licenses issued, and, there is movement, thankfully, but I think the evidence is clear 3 years later that the case of the cartel part of it, the large MSOs controlling the market and just like letting a little trickle of these social equity private owners, kind of outside that ring come into the market. I'm glad that other states are doing it a different way. I think that, but that brings me to a question to you as well. My next question, I guess, would be there in Colorado, they had the first recreational legal market, I believe, in the U.S. And recently their union there of licensed growers, they're asking for a moratorium on licenses issued. They are arguing basically that the value of the crop, the value of their products has bottomed out because there have been enough licenses they're issued. There's enough people who are getting stuff on the shelves that's of low quality, whatever, that they've driven prices to nothing, and the profitability now is, I think, in question. So where I'm just kind of curious as to your opinion, like, there has to be some kind of happy middle ground between what Illinois has done and just completely elbowed out, kept it very tight in terms of which licenses are out there, and what, let's say, a Colorado has done, which is, I guess, sort of flood the market with licenses to grow and dispense and drop the value of the product. There's got to be some kind of sweet spot in the middle there. And I'm just wondering, you did mention a few states before, but I'm wondering, is there any state in your estimation that's kind of found that sweet middle spot?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure about that. But what I would say is that when I look at it, I think there's a giant mistake that the states have been making, which is this idea that we're going to encourage small entrepreneurs and also social equity to get into the part of the business that is the most commoditized and where size and scale and efficiency are the most important. It seems totally absurd that we're trying to push all these people into agriculture, which is capital intensive and depends on size and scale, and then are flabbergasted or shocked when there's suddenly oversupply and small scale, subscale farmers with no cost efficiency and limited access to capital are floundering.
Yeah, it's
just silly. When you want to look at a thriving industry, you wouldn't look at alcohol. It's like, why, the money you can make in alcohol is in the brands, or you want to support, a smaller business, then have the packaged goods store where you're selling alcohol, or create a Bevmo, so to speak, that sells alcohol, create something related to create your own wine brand. But it's like, why would you go and grow the grapes? Like the grapes are only really should be grown in a couple of places.
Yeah.
And it's not a great business, and you need to have size and scale and really know what you're doing. And I know people who've gotten into the wine business, especially California, they got into it. It's a really hard business, and they got into it because of the tax breaks that were available in the 70s. The whole California wine industry is almost created because of the tax breaks that were available from vineyards. And so the idea that we're pushing all of these entrepreneurs and business people into what I would argue is the hardest part of the business just seems ridiculous to me. And it's part of the fact that we have, and it's almost created like a fetish of the cultivation side of the business, which seems silly to me. It should be, if anything, get size and scale and let people who can do it as efficiently as possible. And then if you're going to encourage people, encourage them to come out with new products, with new brands, with new retail concepts, consumption lounges, things like that aren't as capital intensive, where a lot of creativity and hard work matter a lot more than size and scale and capital. And so, and this is part of my issue, is that the whole way the states have rolled out cannabis is by preventing interstate commerce. We have we have created all this inefficiency and created these incentives that don't make any sense, where, you can grow phenomenal outdoor cannabis in Oregon that rivals a lot of the indoor stuff that's grown everywhere else. If it isn't better, and it is grown at a fraction of the cost. And the idea that we aren't encouraging this so that there is all kinds of innovation, new products, and et cetera, it's silly, and it upends decades of activity that's already happened.
Right. That's a hugely important point.
And so we complain about the illicit market, and the reality is we're trying to force this kind of, round peg through a square hole and be like, why isn't it fitting in there when it's been going on for decades?
Yeah.
Because that's where it should be grown.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, just imagining having you sort of spell it out that way. It really should be. I mean, the places like the Emerald Triangle, Northern California, Oregon, it's like we've already figured out the best spot to grow it. And as you said, a fraction of the cost because it's outdoor, and the product that comes out is just super high quality. So why aren't we just having it grown there, and everybody can, instead of focusing on trying to grow it indoors and, grow it in their way and get their own supply, you should just be sourcing it from those better places and sell it in your retail concept. Come up with some kind of smoker's lounge and, give the consumer an experience that they haven't had versus worrying about
brand. Like I've started buying this women's own and run. California has tremendous competition because it's not a limited license state. There's a number of brands, thousands of brands. And I just started buying this higher quality gummy for me, for my own sleep. And I loved it because the brand was like, hey, we're women's own. We're a small company. We've made this vegan gummy that has all these wonderful natural ingredients. You're not just consuming, candy crap.
Right.
And I bought it, and it's been really working for me, and I'm going to keep buying it. And it's like, we should be encouraging more of that. But that only can thrive if there's really high quality cannabis at a low price.
Yeah.
And so by jacking up the price, one, you're hurting all the consumers by artificially keeping prices so high.
Absolutely.
You're hurting the legal market because people just keep buying illicitly if it's a fraction of the cost.
100% they do.
You're just having you're giving consumers very little choice on brands.
Oh, yeah.
On different form factors. So, and I live in Santa Barbara. It's sunny like 330 days of the year. It's
Right.
not more sometimes.
I know.
The average temperature is 70 degrees. I am a big investor and very bullish on Glass House Brands, which has the world's largest greenhouse for cannabis in the world. And it's in Ventura County. It has basically perfect temperatures surrounded by agriculture, all around agriculture, outdoor agriculture. And it's like, why wouldn't you be producing it here
Right.
when they can produce it for, cannabis for $135 a pound, where you're growing it indoors in Massachusetts for over $1,000 a pound.
Yeah, and for like 6 months out of the year, it's the same here in Illinois. It's like it's cold for like.
It's silly how we've, I think it's helpful to like zoom out and be like, hey, if we were gonna, if you were just gonna duplicate what already exists, like we're just trying to enforce and stop what already exists. That's part of the bullish case for the whole cannabis industry, is that they estimate this is already a $100 billion industry.
Right.
It's just most of it is illicit. And so it's very rare for you to have both a new yet existing industry. You just need to bring it into the light of it being legal.
Right, and encourage the stuff that makes consumers more likely to buy legal versus stay with their illicit connections. And I think we saw that in Canada, really. Like, they still haven't squashed their illicit market, and Ontario, I know, has...
Well, Canada has its own issue, which is, well, they've incinerated tens of billions of dollars, is that they are terrible at growing cannabis. This is the other big thing that I've found from researching the space for over 3 years, talking to countless operators, and is how hard it is to grow high-quality cannabis consistently at scale. There are some people that believe it's impossible and that you should only do it on a craft basis. There are other companies that are trying to create supply networks. So the supply chain in cannabis is very immature.
Oh, yeah.
Getting consistent, high-quality cannabis at a price that makes sense is incredibly hard. And when you look at Canada, they have been horrific growers. And there are countless, terrible stories of the quality. And this is part of why when you go to, when you meet with Oregon producers, California, a lot of these people have there's a culture here of growing it for decades. And there's a consumer that has been consuming it for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so the consumer in California and Oregon and Washington is very, very discerning. And the consumers also illicitly in East Coast markets like New York know that the really good stuff comes from California.
Totally.
That's why when all these illegal shops are open in New York City, what are they selling? California brand.
Yep.
California flower. Why? It's because they know that's the really good stuff.
Right.
Because the level of competition and the quality that you had to create in those markets to compete. And so, I think it's not just that in the illicit market is cheap. This is the other really important point. It's not just the illicit market is cheap. It's that the quality compared to a lot of what's grown is crap. Why would you pay 2 or 3x the price for lower quality?
Yeah, nobody's going to do that. It just doesn't make any sense to anyone. And I think once you realize that, it's like it's not even a choice, right, for the consumer. It's like, obviously, I'm going to go this way. It's cheaper and it's better. And so
I've shifted my thinking and my investments to hey, what specifically is this cannabis company going after? What are the competitive advantages they have? What piece of the market are they going after? And where I've come out to is you're either a craft niche cultivator and producer, and you're selling a very high quality, but not in massive size, and maybe you have a bunch of markets where you're piecing this together and you have a great business. Mm-hmm. Or you're going after what's just like Glass House of like the lowest possible cost because you're utilizing the sun and incredible weather, and you're producing cannabis at a level no one can compete at. And it's like Budweiser, like the equivalent of Heineken at scale. And in between those bookmarks, everyone in between is going to get destroyed, either slowly or quickly, because you just won't be able to compete with those two ends. Everything else will be commoditized to the point where you won't make much of a return making median cannabis at not a great, at a relatively expensive price, because there won't be much margin in it.
Man, I just, the way the picture that you paint there for me, it really crystallizes, I think, why it's so problematic here in Illinois. I was just speaking with people who were talking about the startup costs, like the barriers to entry for anybody applying for a dispensary license, social equity or non. And they were talking about how the state asks for $250,000 and just to apply for the license, which you're not guaranteed. And if you don't get it, they don't give you that money back. And if you do get it, now you have to get your space up and running, and you have to all the other costs associated with getting the business up. And now, Aaron, as you're talking about, the margins for somebody who's cultivating here in Illinois to grow stuff in an environment that doesn't have that sunlight that California does, that you'd have to have indoor infrastructure, which costs a lot more to grow than outdoor does. It's just, so many people are going to get creamed, for even trying to get into this.
In an industry where capital it's basically non-existent, you're just not going to have much competition. But I want to touch on your dispensary side, because that's actually really interesting. And that's where, when you look at the larger MSOs, that's where there probably is the largest potential for value creation, in that because the states can control who sells and who doesn't. And they can make it really prohibitive for everyone to open new dispensaries. And not only that, not only do you have the state that can control that, but the local municipality can really exercise a lot of power. And I firmly believe you're just not going to have a lot of municipalities that are going to want like 50 million dispensaries. And so what I see across the country is a lot of municipalities basically saying, hey, we'll allow 3
right.
in our town. And Santa Barbara is a great example. There's only 3 dispensaries in Santa Barbara. And not only that, in California, something like 60% of California, there is no legal dispensary. Because the local municipality, I see it in Florida, and I think there's a big potential for a lot of value creation in Florida, just because to open a dispensary, it's forced verticalization in Florida. So you need to, if you're going to sell cannabis, you need to produce what you're going to sell in your dispensary. So to open a dispensary, you need tremendous amounts of capital. You need not only the cultivation, you need the manufacturing, that product. So it's a huge barrier to entry. And so eventually, when you think about those towns or cities, it's like they're going to control how many dispensaries will be in Florida. And while you may eventually get interstate commerce, forced verticalization may go away, you're still going to have that local control where those dispensaries are really important. And so it's important when you're analyzing the space, and just to remember, it's super weird that most of the companies in cannabis are what's considered these multi-state operators, where they're doing everything. But that's probably not the end state.
Right.
When things are legalized, you're probably going to have distributors, wholesalers, probably going to have retail-only plays. You'll have cultivators. You'll have a house of brands. You may have some hybrid plays in there, but it's super strange what's going on, and it's only because we have this like weird federal illegality, state
Right.
legal. Every state is its own country, and so you have a lot of weirdness going on.
Totally.
So it's really important to me at least, it's really important to look inside and be like, hey, what's going on? Where is there most likely to be the value? And it's important to strip apart, I think, the cultivation piece from the retail piece, and then actually the brands as well.
It's really fascinating. And Aaron Edelheit, thank you again. I appreciate everything you're saying. I want to talk about your book as well, but last question, just on what you were talking about there. When we look toward federal legalization, right? Like, let's say they, hopefully sometime soon they take it off the Schedule I substance list, at the very least decriminalize it. But if they fully legalize and we are able to get this interstate system going, what's the likelihood that, let's say, the Walmarts, the Amazons, the giant corporations just start carrying it, and the DoorDashes and the Uber Eats are offering delivery and stuff? What's the likelihood that the major established corporations are just going to kind of come in and take the major business and distributions from the ones that are setting themselves up right now?
I think it's very unlikely. Anytime soon. Again, because of the local and municipal rules. There
Gotcha.
are very, very strict rules of how it can be sold in your town or city, how the state rules are. And there's a big difference between interstate commerce and that it can cross state lines, and then how consumers can buy it.
Gotcha.
And the local cities and towns, counties, and the state can determine how exactly. I'll give you a great example. In Virginia and New Hampshire, if you want to buy liquor, you have to go to a state store. You cannot buy it in a Walmart or Amazon. You can't buy it in a grocery store. And the idea that you're going to have something, look, I'm bullish on cannabis, but the idea that you are not going to strictly control, especially to make sure that no one under the age of 21 is buying, or that it's getting into, it's easily purchased by kids, it just seems highly unlikely to me.
Gotcha.
And also a potential major risk to those corporations.
Yeah, fair point.
Why would you take on that potential liability risk? When you go into a dispensary now, I don't know what it's like in Illinois, but in California, they scan your, you have to step one. I go into this, small little room, they check my ID, and then I go into the next, and it's like very controlled.
For sure. Same here. Yep.
Very protected. I mean, this still, you can get really high, right? Like, no one's overdosing and dying, but like, this still alters, your
state of mind. Totally.
State of mind. And so you want to be careful with this, and that's how it's been rolled out. And I think just because it's federally decriminalized and allows interstate commerce, there still will be kind of massive local and state control as to how and where this is sold.
Great. Good. Gotcha. Thanks for that perspective. That's a really good point. Let's talk a little about your book, The Hard Break, The Case for a 24/6 Lifestyle. You mentioned that, that day off is really important to you as a workaholic. You kind of, if you're left to your own devices, I imagine you'll go 24/7. And, the book obviously deals with why it's super important to take that day for yourself. Can you talk a little about what's in the book and why that's important?
Yeah, I just kind of tell my story, and I used to do it, and and I hit a very difficult part of my life where I thought, I started underperforming, and a couple of bad things personally happened to me, and then I just went through this very dark period. And first thought was like, hey, I just got to grind it out. I really have to put in more hours, and just I saw no benefit to that. It just kept getting worse. And I'm Jewish, so I fell back on my tradition. I was like, what if I just turn off my phone on a Saturday morning? So right before I went to sleep, and then I would try to make it till noon the next day. That's how addicted I am to my phone. And I did that, and I was like, okay, maybe I can make it till 2 or 3. And then I did that for, a couple months. And then finally I was like, let me try it the whole day. And the benefits were just so amazing to me. Like, just one, I felt free. 2, I started coming up with ideas. I had this whole recovery period. I found myself getting excited when I was turning back on. And I found that the quality of my work, the quality of my thinking radically improved. And I've now been doing it for, close to like 20 years. I could not imagine going back. It seems absurd to me that we are on call to every single person we've ever met or know at every waking hour. Like, how in the world could that be good? And so what I decided to do, especially after I sold my company, it was a lot of ups and downs. I tell about the American Home, my single family rental company. And I don't think I could have survived that if I wasn't taking a day off. And I decided to do a bunch of research and say, like, hey, what does the scientific data say on this? And are there other people that are practicing this in some way, shape, or form? And so I have over 200 footnotes in the book. My editor had me strip out dozens more, saying you're not writing a scientific journal, but the data is actually overwhelming, that it's like really bad for your health, what we're doing. It's really bad for your mental health. It's bad for your family. It's bad for business. It's bad for creativity and for innovation. And then I interviewed and profiled a bunch of people, atheists, Christians, Seventh-day Adventists, Jewish, who practice it in some way, shape, or form, that have been wildly successful. And so it's really kind of the business case. I spent about 3.5 years, something I feel very, very passionate about. It has been literally the best thing in my life. It's just knowing, because kind of what I know is that I can grind until Friday, and then I know I'm having a vacation every week.
Yeah.
And then I have this recovery period, and then I come back. And not only that, so much of business now is about creativity and coming up with new ideas and thinking through problems. And so when you study it, it turns out that when you give yourself a break, you activate the default mode network of your brain. And what that does is when you're daydreaming or you're just kind of relaxing, is the part of your brain works on forming patterns and understanding all the input that you've brought into your brain. And so if you've ever had the proverbial idea in the shower, or you're going for a walk,
right,
and suddenly oh my gosh, I should do this. It's because your brain, you don't know it, but your brain's working on trying to process everything. And so just imagine being on your phone and working all the time. You're actually hurting your chances of like coming up with that next great idea or solving that problem by just not relaxing and not giving yourself a chance to breathe. And so it's been a huge positive in my life, and I just try to spread the message about that. And it's especially if you're investing. I mean, look, cannabis has been in a terrible bear market. Like the stock market's been terrible. Lots of people are, terrible performance. This has been a very hard year on a number of levels for lots of people. The last couple of years, because COVID, has been really tough. It's also incredibly valuable just to remind yourself to be like, the world goes on, keeps spinning without you.
Right.
And that just to remind yourself that, like, I'm Aaron. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not CEO Aaron. I'm not, investor Aaron. I'm just Aaron. And
Right.
I can just be myself. And that's also important as well, is just to remind you what's important in life and to think more longer term than just the day-to-day moment.
Man, that's you so well said, and so many important points in there, and I can totally relate to that. I think especially now, you mentioned turning off the phones, like everybody is so addicted to them in that way that you mentioned, where even the prospect of turning it off for 12 hours like fills some people with dread, I think, and making yourself take that break and forcing, to unplug. I believe everything that you're saying about the research proving how valuable that is, and for all the different reasons, I think it's super important. Where can people get the book if they're interested?
I think you can get it on Amazon.
Nice. Perfect. The Hard Break, the case for the 24/6 lifestyle. Aaron Edelheit, thank you again for jumping on so much. I know that also just Mindset Capital is your company. It's a private investment firm, but just curious, if people are interested in that, where can they find out more about it and check it out?
Oh, well, they can find me on Twitter, which I use pretty actively. My handle is Aaron Value, AARON Value. And then you can also subscribe to my free newsletter, which is mindsetvalue.substack.com as well.
There you go. There it is. So, definitely check out the book and check out what Aaron is doing at Mindset Capital as well. Great newsletter full of information, exactly like what we were just talking about. Aaron, I kind of like to wrap these up by doing some quick hits questions, just 5 rapid fire.
Sure.
What do you prefer? You game for this?
Sure. Go for it.
Excellent. Right on. All right, cool. I start with morning bird or night owl. Which are you?
Night owl.
Nice. Right on. Late nighter. I get it. Favorite cuisine. Now, this is like a celebratory meal if it's your birthday or if you've got a celebration, you just sold the real estate company years ago, for instance. Where's the celebration dinner happening, or what is it that you're eating?
Oh, that's a really good question. It used to be Italian food, but as I mentioned with dairy, I can't really process. It's probably like really great sushi now.
Yeah, love that. Love a good sushi. Yellowtail is my thing. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Substance of choice. I ask all my guests this. Whether this might be. Are you a coffee drinker in the morning? Do you like tea or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Coffee's the one.
I never had a cup of coffee until my third child was born.
Wow.
And now I have at least one every day.
I get that. I relate to that a lot. I'm a big fan. Specifically myself, I love the cannabis and coffee combo. I'm just a big fan of that regularly.
Oh, I haven't tried that. I should try that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't tried that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I always kind of talk about it on the show a little bit. It's something that's great. Something you like to watch, movie or TV show, whether it's a classic that you'll leave on anytime you come across it, or that you'll seek out, when you're kind of in the mood to be feeling any kind of way. What's something you love to watch?
In general, I like to either watch stuff that's funny or watch something that's fantasy or sci-fi. It's the same thing with books. I really, really just want to escape when I watch TV, and I try not to watch anything that's too in the moment, political drama, dark or horror. I think the world is already can be pretty daunting.
Yep.
So I like to escape or laugh.
Right on. Yeah, I get
that.
that.
Right now, I'm actually really enjoying Welcome to Wrexham.
Oh, the soccer. Yeah. Ryan Reynolds and
McElhaney.
Yeah.
Bought a 50-year soccer club and are trying to turn it around. I think it's a phenomenal show, and I'm really enjoying it. It's on FX.
Right on. Hey, I've seen promos for it, and I will definitely check that out. Thanks for that.
It's excellent.
Nice.
In my opinion.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm reading a book right now, sci-fi. It's House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. And I don't know if you've read it, but I highly recommend it. It is just a sci-fi.
I'll write it down. I love
Yeah, it's just a sci-fi buffet, and it's like a galactic mystery on a bunch of different levels. It's just one of the best sci-fi journeys I've been on too, and I'm so into it.
Great. Is it like SUNS or SONS?
SUNS.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, right on. I think you'll love it, definitely. And then final quick hit. I'm just interested, kind of what music either gets you going or relaxes you if you're driving in your car, or if you're, at home, just kind of looking to change your mindset or maybe focus on some stuff. What's some music you like to listen to?
So if I want to relax or just sit back and enjoy, I love like Frank Sinatra. I love Red Garland on jazz piano, or Oscar Peterson. Just to enjoy. I mean, I love all kinds of music, but I really love country music. And so I have a broad. I really enjoy music. I consume I listen to it all the time, and so I can listen to almost anything.
For sure, I get that. An eclectic palette. I feel like I have that with music as well. Just nice to kind of take in a bunch of different styles and sounds and combinations. It's audio has a great effect on your mind, and it can take you into different places pretty quickly. I like that. Well, listen, Aaron Edelheit, again, CEO of Mindset Capital and author of The Hard Break: A Case for a 24/6 Lifestyle. Thank you so much for jumping on today and sharing your perspective and some great insight into the cannabis industry and, just, I think, life in general. Thanks a lot for coming by today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And there you have it, listener. I'd like to thank again my guest, Aaron Edelheit, the author of The Hard Break: The Case for a 24/6 Lifestyle. And you can find more of his stuff on his website or on Twitter, as he mentioned in the interview. Before I let you go, there was an article from Forbes that came out that I thought was worth bringing up. The title is AI-Powered Study on Cannabis Suggests Ways to Predict a Beneficial High, written by Emily Erlenbaugh, I believe, Erlenbaugh, possibly. It was published February 17th in the morning. And I wanted to go through this because I kind of changed how I felt about it as I went through the article. At first, I was a little bit skeptical. I thought that it was maybe a study that just kind of told us something we already knew. And then as I went through, I found that it did expose some complexities surrounding cannabis and how it does interact with different users of it. And this new study, as the article starts, is shedding light on factors that might predict if a session of cannabis use will help ease an individual's symptoms or just make things worse. The study was put out this month in the journal Comprehensive Psychiatry. It found that the severity of mental health symptoms before a session of cannabis use could usually predict whether that session would be beneficial for the person using it. As the author notes, cannabis can create a wide variety of different experiences and effect between users, individuals reporting everything from deep relaxation, happiness, energy, and pain relief to intense anxiety, paranoia, lethargy, and depression. Sometimes the same individual can use the same cannabis on two different occasions and get different results. I have experienced that for myself, where I smoked the same cannabis 2 different days, 2 different circumstances, and just had very different experiences. And this actually gets back to something that I've talked about with friends of mine. I've brought it up on the show before, but it has to do with kind of the circumstances or what perspective you're bringing to a drug session. And I think that applies to cannabis. That's what we're talking about here, but it applies to other drugs as well. Psychoactives, certainly things like psilocybin, things like mushrooms or LSD or MDMA, but also, even alcohol and perhaps opiates as well. But the phrase that often comes up when you're discussing these kinds of topics is set and setting. And the set, it refers to your mindset, and the setting refers to the place that you are, whether you're around people with whom you're comfortable, whether you're in a place where you are comfortable, or if the setting is a place where you're not familiar, if you're at some person's house that you've never met before, or maybe you're with somebody that for whatever reason is kind of making you feel nervous or just not in the best place. That sort of setting is not conducive to a a relaxed and comfortable high experience. You might feel sort of negative stuff from that. And that setting can impact your experience. The same is true of your own mindset. You bring some of the energy to this party. What your mindset is going into that session, that is also going to have a big effect on your experience. Are you thinking about something that happened at work earlier that day where you had an unpleasant or tense exchange with one of your colleagues or your boss, and now you're kind of nervous about what the fallout's going to be? Well, that tension, those nerves are going to ripple and kind of affect your high. That mindset is going to have an effect on you. And let's say you're hungry and maybe you're angry at somebody for, cutting you off on the road earlier on your way to this place. Hopefully cannabis would, just kind of help you shrug that off. But if you're in such a place where that just kind of triggered some bigger stressors that you're feeling right now, that obviously is not going to help you. You're just going to kind of snowball. You're going to spin around and go deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole where you're surrounded by those stresses and fears and concerns. And that's not a place anybody wants to be. And so this Forbes article kind of touching on that set and setting notion here, but I wanted to get to the study itself, and it notes that thus far the science predicting what kind of high someone would experience is mostly focused on factors like chemical compounds like terpenes, or how it was consumed like dabs versus bongs or bowls, or edible consumption, something like that. But as the article continues, the data on these cannabis experiences were taken from 1,307 cannabis users using the app Strain Print. This app allows cannabis users to record their own experiences while using cannabis to manage mental health symptoms. Machine learning models were then used to predict self-assessed symptom changes after cannabis use. Factors tracked during the process included anxiety, depression, insomnia, age, gender, and ratio of CBD to THC. Now, here's the interesting part. Researchers found that the severity of mental health symptoms before cannabis use could predict whether an instance of cannabis would be beneficial in terms of reducing the symptom. Age, gender, and CBD to THC ratio also played a predictive role. And an example that the author gives here: researchers found that those reporting lower severity in their depression scores before using cannabis had a higher likelihood of having symptom relief from cannabis, while those reporting higher severity depression tended to have worse symptoms after a cannabis session. This could suggest that cannabis might be helpful for those with mild depression, but likely more harmful for those in a more severe depressive state. Sort of an interesting subtlety. Whereas, if you're pro-cannabis and you find that it helps you with your depression, I think that's your perspective, and that's valid, and it's wonderful that cannabis is helping you that way. But it does kind of address this subtlety where somebody else, if maybe they're in a little bit of a more severely depressed state, that perspective, they find cannabis doesn't help them for whatever reason. Now, again, these are based on individual experiences. 1,300 is I would say, a small sample size, and it's one of those meta-analyses of studies as well. So, take all this for what it's worth. But I do think that there's some merit to discussing these subtleties. And again, this is the kind of research where figuring out and using something like AI to kind of figure out and predict factors that will really determine what your experience is like after cannabis use. She goes on in this article, Emily Erlenbaugh, she continues, and she says that in contrast, those suffering from mild insomnia saw almost no improvement after cannabis, but those reporting higher levels of insomnia usually found some level of relief from cannabis use. And as I've mentioned on the show before, insomnia, trouble getting to sleep at night, was one of the chief reasons that I turned to cannabis as much as I did, because I found after some friends introduced me that it really helped me with that. And that alone was kind of a reason why I kept it around in my life, and I still find that to be the case. This is all interesting stuff. I won't finish the article. I will share it on the show's social media pages, but I did think that was worth bringing to your attention. And finally, High Times put out an article. This just came out today from when I'm recording this, Tuesday, February 21st. The headline here is a study shows current or lifetime cannabis use associated with lower blood pressure. Among the myriad benefits cannabis can offer, it looks like the plant medicine may be linked to lower blood pressure levels. This article, written by Keegan Williams. And he continues, according to new data published in the journal Nature Scientific Reports that assess the relationship between cannabis consumption and blood pressure in a cohort of more than 91,000 subjects, both current and lifetime cannabis use are associated with lower blood pressure levels. These results were observed among all consumers, but in a higher manner in women, according to the study. French researcher Alexandre Vallée, might have been butchering that there, but conducted the study association between cannabis use and blood pressure levels according to comorbidities and socioeconomic status, noting the conflicting evidence surrounding cardiovascular risks of cannabis use. The author also cites the limited population focus of past studies, along with the fact that few studies surrounding cardiovascular health and cannabis look specifically at differences between sexes. The article goes on and says the study used data from the UK Biobank, a prospective cohort for the investigation, prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease in adults. Now, the sample size is large, which is great, but the article kind of gets into the weeds of why people were cut out from the study and how the cannabis use was documented, which was through a self-reported questionnaire. Participants were asked about their cumulative lifetime cannabis use and how the study qualified the different respondents. And then ultimately the article outlines that they found no cut and dry answers. There is a quote from the study discussion. It says, "Nevertheless, the abrupt cessation of cannabis use was associated with increase in blood pressure." End quote, the discussion states. So, among other variables, they mentioned that alcohol consumption also showed a possible confounding action regarding the cannabis use and the blood pressure readings. Study focused on middle-aged UK participants, so the results can't really be generalized to other age groups and ethnic populations. They also did not establish data on frequency of cannabis use around the 30 days prior to the interview, leaving it challenging to distinguish whether the relationship between cannabis and blood pressure was short-term or chronic in nature. So again, that is a lot of gray at the end of the study. However, one thing is clear, and quoted from that is that when cannabis use is stopped, blood pressure tends to rise. So that right there does seem to indicate that regardless of whether you're a lifetime cannabis user or whether you're just using it currently, there does seem to be some relationship with blood pressure. And again, that's just one thing that is something else on this long list of topics related to cannabis that are worth pursuing. You can add this link with lower blood pressure to it. And again, this is a High Times article. I will share it. That's all I'm going to read from it. I encourage you to go through and read it yourself and draw your own conclusions with that. But I did think it was interesting and certainly worth considering as we move forward and cannabis again is more normalized and utilized in everyday civilized society. But that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to watch the social media channels for the show at C-Man Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can also click the question or comments link in the description notes and leave any sort of reply or a question. Love engaging with you on the topic of cannabis and anything else you feel like talking about, and leave a rating or review for the show on whichever platform you're using to listen to this on. I would very much appreciate that shout out and the love online. So we'll be back again next week with another great episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Have a great day. Cannabis Man is an original production of myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson. Other music by Pat Perez, and logo designed by Vorbroker Media. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and share whenever you can.